All right, Matteo, thank you so much for doing this. Super excited. I think as you've seen, I think maybe on Twitter a couple of times, the 8 Sleep product is probably the most life-changing product for me personally. Whenever people ask the question, just in terms of quality of life improvements that I've experienced easily in 10 years. So, really huge fan of you all and the team, and it's been really fun to kind of watch as the product has evolved and as the organization has grown. So I'm very excited to do this. Why don't we start, I guess, with just for folks who are familiar, maybe what 8 Sleep is and maybe what the genesis was, how you came up with the idea.
Yeah, sure. So 8 Sleep is a technology that can improve your sleep. It does it through thermoregulation. So each side of the bed can have a different temperature. We can heat you or cool you based on your preferences and also based on what is the optimal for your sleep. Everything started because of 2 reasons. First, I used to be an athlete when I was a teenager, so I have always been in performance and recovery. And second, at a certain point around 7 years ago, I started wondering why Elon Musk is taking me to Mars, but I still spend a third of my life on a piece of dumb foam. Why there was no technology in a third of my life, and technology was not enhancing my sleep performance. And so that is when I decided to fix it, or at least to try to fix it. And now we have the current product.
How did you get from that idea to thermoregulation as kind of the modality for improving sleep? What was that process like?
Yeah, great question. 2 reasons. The first one is if you talk to people, the temperature you will notice is always extremely important for them. A lot of people sleep hot, a lot of people sleep cold, and more than anything, 50% of the couples, they have different preferences. And there is a physiological reason for that. So that is number one. Number 2 is there is plenty of medical evidence that thermoregulation, and so temperature, can improve your sleep performance. Now we see it through our data, but our customers, they fall asleep up to 20% faster. They get up to 40% less toss and turns and wake ups. And now we also have evidence that we can improve your HRV by 10%, which equals to the HRV you had 6 years earlier.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's exciting. Yeah. I mean, we that 100% kind of, we did blackout shades. We did magnesium, I did blue light glasses. I did all those kinds of things. And, but we bought several mattresses, and falling asleep was incredibly difficult because I would just get hot constantly. And then to your point, my wife is the exact opposite. So, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, that I've seen you use terminology that kind of signaled to me that maybe you were obviously familiar at a minimum with like lean startup, and maybe we're implementing some of the processes in terms of customer development and things like that. I'd be really curious because this is a physical product, and most of the people that do lean startup type stuff, they apply it to software. And I know you obviously got a software component to it, but especially in the early days when you're doing customer discovery and things like that, and you're trying to do rapid prototyping and iterating on the product and things like that, like how did you apply some of that? And maybe what were some of the nuances that were different when you're trying to build a physical product or a hybrid physical software type product?
It's a great question. And actually, even today, after multiple years and with a larger team, the product development process for software and hardware is very different. On software, I think we have reached a point where we are really good at very small iterations, almost on a weekly basis. So we move extremely fast, and we are obsessed with iteration, customer feedback, and you keep adjusting. On hardware, that is not possible, right? A startup that wants to move extremely fast, they can ship a product every 12 months. But usually the rule of thumb is that you should ship a product every 18 months if you're extremely good and efficient. So at a certain point, you can do some customer discovery, but we notice that they tend to be mainly directional, right? So customers, they don't know what they don't know. Now, there is the famous thing from Henry Ford saying if you were asking people what they wanted, they would have told you that they wanted faster horses. They wouldn't have thought about the car, right? So the principle is similar. And so you need to focus on the pain points. And so what we heard originally was that, okay, I sleep hot and I keep sweating, or I fight with my partners because I want a colder temperature, she doesn't, or my wife goes to sleep with socks and a sweatshirt, things like that, right? Yeah. But you never want to focus on how to solve it for others. That is your job as an entrepreneur or as a startup. And then at a certain point, you just need to commit and go for that. So you will have way less data points. I will call it somewhere between 60 and 80% data points, while instead, I don't know, on the website or on the app, we get to statistical significance for everything we do.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and it seems like, clearly you made a lot of decisions around the form factor for the product. I mean, like the cover itself has a different feel to it than any other mattress I've ever seen. You've got machinery kind of going on underneath that, so you have some kind of some interesting kind of constraints there. How do you go from like this directional, how do you take these directional, anecdotal, relatively small sample size pieces of feedback, given the stakes and given the kind of an 18-month kind of turnaround time? How do you make decisions based on that data and incorporate it into the product?
At the end of the day, the thing that has helped us the most is we have a vision. So I wrote a memo in 2017 outlining our vision and what we want to build. And so we know we want to fix sleep, right? We want to compress your sleep and save your life. Compress your sleep means that you will be able to sleep and achieve the same amount of rest in less time. As an exaggeration, imagine if you could sleep only 6 hours and get more rest than when you were sleeping 8 hours, right? Yeah. And there's clinical evidence of what impacts your sleep, right? Is temperature of the bed and the air, light, noise, and air, right? And so, okay, as long as you develop a great experience, you know that will improve sleep. On the other side, is saving your life means that doesn't matter if you sleep 6 or 8 hours, it's still a lot of time. It's almost an intercontinental flight every single night. And so there we are just working on sensors that can detect early signs of, illnesses or any problem with your own health. So by having this vision, we know what we want to execute against. Then it becomes more a matter of, okay, what form factor or what user experience.
Got it. Okay, got it. It's funny because you entered you mentioned 2017. It was sort of an interesting time. Mattresses were, there were dozens and dozens of mattress companies that kind of came out, and the viral ads and all of those kinds of things. And they were just, people were plowing money into these companies, and they were spending a ton of that on a customer acquisition. And it sounds like a lot of them ended up being kind of upside down. You seem to have approached getting early traction very differently than how a lot of them did. It didn't seem like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it didn't seem like you were heavily reliant on paid, for example. You ride a lot more like organic channels and word of mouth and things like that. How did you, as you were evaluating the competitive landscape, how did that inform your decision-making from a distribution standpoint, from an initial traction standpoint? How did that inform the decisions you made there?
Yeah, it's a great question. We are really inspired by companies like Tesla more than a typical D2C brand. And so Tesla spent zero in paid marketing, right? Yeah. Everything is invested in the product. And so we tend to have that approach. At the same time, in good or in bad, we really don't look at mattress companies. We don't have one single foam expert in the whole organization, right? And the whole point is dumb foam can be purchased by manufacturers. It's literally like going to the market, and it's just a matter of how much you want to pay, right? But the foam exists. You don't have to invent nothing, right? And I think what a lot of these mattress companies did, which was still great, they reinvented the purchase experience. So you wouldn't go to the store. You can just buy online. It's good. Right. It's proven. There are a lot of reviews, right? So that is where they innovated, but they didn't innovate with the product. The product was the same, again, piece of dumb foam that we have been using since 1966, when I think memory foam was invented. Yeah. So in our case, we went in a very opposite direction and say, look, we don't care about the foam. We don't even have a foam expert. We just focus on the technology for sleep enhancement. Yeah. And we rely on word of mouth. So today, still 20-30% of our sales comes through word of mouth. It's just people referring, people like you, they like the product, they talk to friends while they're having dinners, and the friends end up buying.
Yeah, got it. Okay, that's interesting. You know, so obviously there's like the manufacturing piece of it. There's also, you know, shipping concerns, how you handle returns, because, you know, you pack it in a box. It kind of, if for some reason there's an issue, I would imagine you've had to learn a lot kind of on the fly around dealing with physical products, and especially something that has a pretty large footprint, you know. For folks that are maybe interested in building physical product based businesses, what were maybe some of the lessons that you learned? I don't know if you had a background in it prior, but what were some of the lessons that you've learned about running and operating a company that has inventory, has warehousing, has, you know, all those kinds of things? Anything interesting that you learned there relative that might be surprising to people who are used to kind of just being in a software based world?
Yeah, a lot. We could talk for days or weeks about the hard lessons. But let me try to distill the most important ones. So in my case, I didn't have any experience in hardware, so it was something completely new. So the number one thing is invest very early in experts in hardware, both program managers and engineers, because otherwise you will always underestimate how long does it take to build and develop something. Right? Supply chain. The other challenge is when you start, you can ship new products quickly because you are still moving a small number of units. As you start getting bigger and you approach, I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars in units, a new product introduction is not just complicated because you need to produce a lot of units, but it becomes also way more risky for the business, right? Because if you introduce a new product and the product doesn't work, before it was impacting your top line a couple of millions of dollars, now it's hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
The other key thing people underestimate, and I was underestimating, is the importance of margins. Our margins today are really good, but at the time I was completely naive about the importance. And so it has been I would say a great lesson that I have learned about how to fix them. But if you don't have margins, particularly with CACs today, right, and paid media, no way you can scale and still have a healthy business.
Yeah. When you're starting off, how do you, like, if you were going to do it again, using the margin lesson, how, what would you do to, cause there's a relationship again, like you're prototyping these early ones, like you said, and you're shipping them out to a couple of people, and you have a slightly compressed time frame in terms of your iteration speed. Were there things that you could have done that would have had a big impact on margin, even in the early days when you're trying to iterate on product? Or is it really kind of once you know what the thing is, and now it's time to kind of maybe on a smaller scale, but mass produce things? Is like, when would you have made the switch to a margin focus? It sounds like earlier, but maybe not at the very beginning, or is that incorrect?
I would say at the end of the day, what I have learned is it's never a price problem, it's a value problem, right? Because if you deliver value, and particularly in the early days of a startup, the first 3 years, there is plenty of people that can pay whatever they want for your product if your product is good and is delivering a meaningful value to them, right? So sometimes even internally, we had some pushback from our team to say, oh, maybe we're not too narrow in our brand positioning because we're going for people in performance. Maybe we should be broader. That will help our growth. What I can tell you is all the times that we narrowed our audience and we increased prices, obviously together with raising the bar of the product, it always accelerated our sales. And so that is where the value of the product is more important than the price. People, if your product is good, in the early days, people will pay a couple of $100 more to give you the margin you deserve. If your product sucks, then focus on the product and not on the price either.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like it can create, if you do it right, it seems like it can create a virtuous cycle too, where it's you're starting with you're compressing your beachhead market. It seems like in your case, you were able to find an aspirational market that other people look up to. So like, here's a group of people who have willingness to pay, who tend to be kind of on the bleeding edge from like a biohacking perspective or whatever it is, and have all these other people look up to them. And in your case, I would think that you can make the ROI justification is relatively easy for those people where they're like you said, I've spent a third of my life asleep on this thing. So from a, if I amortize this expense based on how much time I spend on it, the ROI is a no-brainer. So I think that probably, that's huge.
It's bigger if you think it's bigger than a car. I always say that, right? People spend whatever from $15K to hundreds of thousands of dollars in a car, and you use the car probably 2 hours a day. Here we are talking about 4x that usage plus the health impact. So I think that is where there is actually an opportunity over time in our business, where potentially if you deliver more value, you can even increase prices. The key is, how do you deliver a 10x bigger value, right? It's something like the value needs to grow 10x for you to increase the price 20%. This is almost a 5x relationship between value and price increase.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things, I mean, anybody that's used it, I would have to think, feels that way. And so, but it's the kind of thing where it's like you have to use it before you, it's not, unlike a car, which there's a lot of status kind of baked into it. Although, I mean, just based on what people do on Twitter, I mean, there's a signaling component. Yeah. Like
the point.
Yeah.
It took us some time, but it's getting there, which is, it's surprising. At the beginning, one of the challenges we had as a company is something that our product, you don't see it, right? A lot of wearables, now you're here in the call and you just see me wearing an Apple Watch. Our product, you don't see it, but it has reached a status with at least a certain audience where people are proud of saying that they're sleeping on that because it means they're taking care of their health.
Yeah. Was that a deliberate strategic decision that were there things that you did from a strategic marketing perspective to make it more likely that, did you see a world where 8 Sleep would become kind of a I don't want to use the words, I mean, a status symbol in a way? I mean, was that a deliberate thing, or did you just kind of, that just happened by accident?
It was deliberate, but you used the perfect word. We did things that would make it more likely, but you don't have 100% certainty, right?
Sure, right.
That was a North Star, and we tried to say, okay, how can we make this thing a thing where people are proud of sleeping on this product, and sleeping on this product means something about the person that you are. Yeah. But obviously there was a huge component of unknown if this could ever work. Yeah.
But by doing it, I mean, to your point, I mean, it's if you can create that environment, your pricing ability has almost no upper. I mean, I guess it would take eventually you would reach an upper bound, but I mean, I bet those people, especially the people who have used it at this point, I bet if they went back again and you said, and they know what they now know, and you said the mattress is $10K, I bet they'd still do it, because the impact on their life was so high, and that group of people, their price elasticity is such that would be it would still be a no-brainer, which is a pretty unique position for you all to be in. It's pretty exciting.
The other thing I learned, at least in our business, is you don't want to get into a price war, which is what happened to a lot of the D2C mattress businesses, right? Because that is where you compress margins and you just fight about pricing and offers. And there is, in the long term, it's going to kill the company, because unless you have an incredible competitive advantage in margins and your ability to drop prices, how do you win? And so our board have always pushed us to, again, increase the value and to prove that the value would justify a higher price. Then if it doesn't justify, then you have a different type of problem. But focus on potentially delivering more value, and at that point find bigger margins, even if that requires more R&D.
That makes sense. You mentioned the board. Along those lines, you obviously raised venture. On the one hand, it was a category, and I know you don't think of yourself as a mattress company, but I would imagine that was at least initially how they kind of, the box that maybe they put you in. But you broke probably a lot of mental models for some of those funds in terms of the types of products that they typically invest in and things like that. How did you convince the early investors to kind of come in and to kind of buy into this vision? Like, what did they see that you saw, and what were you in alignment on?
So, right, today we have two products, right? One is the cover, one is the mattress. But the biggest part of our revenue is the cover. And so essentially the cover, you can place it on top of any mattress that you have, of any bed. So you can keep whatever you have, or you can buy whatever you have, and you can just make it smart with our technology. So if you look at our business from that lens, we are really a wearable company. You just don't have to wear our product. It's a different form factor, but we are really competing with Apple Watch and the other wearables. The advantage that we have is our form factor is unique, and so make us different. Our form factor is something that you use every single day once you buy it, unless you're traveling. And so it gives us an incredible retention for your own data. And second, we have a lot of space. And so we can use sensors that no wearable company can afford in terms of cost and space. And so if you think of us becoming potentially the greatest health platform for consumers, there is no better form factor, because again, you use the product every single day, and we can embed hundreds of sensors, and the impact on our margin will be minimal. So that is how we convince our investors since from the beginning.
That's pretty fascinating. Yeah, a lot of wearables, I know, like in a healthcare context, when they're prescribed by a physician or whatever it is, and I would imagine even just like in a D2C standpoint, from a retention perspective, adherence is a huge issue. Like you said, like you have to fold this thing into your life in a material way, and whether that's a continuous glucose monitor, or even like, I had the Oura Ring for a while, and I had to remember to charge it. And if I forgot to charge it, then I didn't get good data. And like, to your point, like I don't have to do anything. I just lie down and the data, shows up. So that's really interesting. Very cool. I obviously found out, and I think probably most people found out about you all, or maybe not most, but many people found out about through Twitter. And you've used Twitter, I think, masterfully, both as a marketing tool, as a customer support tool. It seems like it's probably been pretty instrumental to your business. I guess A, is that true? And B, to the degree that it's true, like what have you learned maybe about how to leverage Twitter for other founders that are trying to kind of get started and are thinking that might be a piece of their their marketing mix? Like what has it been useful for, and how have you learned how to leverage it?
So for us, it has been extremely useful. I was not using Twitter at all until probably 2 years ago. If you're targeting the tech community, is the perfect place to be, because a lot of tech people are on Twitter. That is the platform that is being used, right? And so for us, our early adopters were tech people, so it was the best place to be. The second thing you learn is customers like to connect a face to a brand and to a product. And this comes with pros and cons, right? When they want to kick your ass because there is a bug in the product, then obviously they tweet at me or they DM me. But at the same time, it gives them a sense of trust of, okay, so there is this human being, there is this person, this guy with this name that is behind this company, and he's putting 100 hours a week of effort and work time to make it happen. And so that has helped a lot for us. And the third is I'm a big promoter of building in public. Right? So in particular, if you have a company with big technological ambitions, the more you disclose, the better, because it's what happened with Tesla. Then people will start caring about this company, and they will forgive you if there are certain small bugs, because in the grand scheme of your roadmap, there is still so much that you can deliver in terms of value to them that there is forgiveness.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I mean, even you mentioned like when things go wrong, people have an easy way to reach out to you. But I mean, you all seem like that's an opportunity too. Like there's a book, old book, Discipline of Market Leaders. And it kind of talked about, you can compete in 3 different areas. It's like product quality, which I think you all are doing really well. But most startups kind of can struggle there because they don't have the resources. And then it's like operational excellence. And then the third one, it's customer intimacy. And like one of the things I took from that book was everybody can compete on customer intimacy. They just usually choose not to. And because it's hard, right? But relative to every other, to the degree that you would, lump other mattress companies or whatever in as a competitor of yours, you're the only one, I would imagine, where someone has an issue and they find you and they reach out to you. And I mean, I've experienced it even, it wasn't necessarily you directly, but I think, like your customer support via Twitter is incredible. I mean, it's unlike most other consumer products that you could buy. So, I mean, like, yes, probably a pain in the ass, but also I would imagine that was a huge source of value and its own, form of word of mouth. So now you have, hey, this product changed my life. And then, oh, by the way, they're also amazing if you ever have an issue. That's a huge strategic advantage, I would think.
I think if you have a consumer business, you need to really focus on that. This doesn't mean we're perfect. We are not. We had our not tough times, but making customer support really good is a must. I don't think it's even a decision. You have to nail that. Because otherwise you just kill the whole word of mouth. Yeah,
it's been huge. Along the kind of that marketing lens, I know you recently announced a partnership with the Mercedes Formula One team, which sounds like that's kind of close to your heart anyway. But you've also done partnerships with CrossFit athletes and things like that. Like I'd be curious what you've learned maybe about doing partnerships as a piece of your marketing mix as well, and like when that's useful. What is it? It's obviously not necessarily a direct response thing, but clearly there's it's a brand component. But what have you learned about kind of exploring partnerships and when they're appropriate?
I think the part that works the best is they say something about the brand, right?
Okay.
And so you will not expect a major acceleration in sales the day you announce a partnership in CrossFit or an athlete in CrossFit. But you start putting pieces about who you are for. And it doesn't mean that we are for CrossFit athletes only. Clearly we're not. But you're almost setting an expectation for your customers, even if they are not in CrossFit. The people that are extremely focused on their performance and recovery use this product. So it almost generates a sense of trust. Yeah. And it also gives a sense of, okay, this product is for people in fitness, not in CrossFit, not in Formula One, not people just going to berries. But when you start putting all these pieces together, if you are taking care of your health, if you're health conscious, you will immediately say, oh, probably this is the product for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there anything else?
Elevates the brand.
Yeah, totally, 100%. Aspirational types of purchases. Is there anything else you've learned about? You mentioned kind of obsession over the product is probably the first and best way to maximize the likelihood of word of mouth. But is there anything else that you've learned about kind of engineering? Again, like you said, you can't guarantee it, but anything else you've learned about maximizing the chances of success in terms of driving organic word of mouth? Because it seems like it's a huge percentage of your customer acquisition, I would think, just based on what I've seen. Anything else you've learned there?
For the word of mouth specifically, I mean, obviously there are a bunch of tricks, right? Of how you surface that in the app. Obviously, even for referrals, you want to make sure that there is a benefit for the person referring the product, but there is also a benefit for the person who will end up buying the product. So it's like a financial benefit on both sides. But what we have seen in our case, a lot of our customers, they don't even use the referral code because probably they don't know, they don't remember. And so they just keep recommending it because at the end of the day, the impact on their life, specifically in our case, their sleep, is so meaningful that they rave about that, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes you just want to, what we call it is a multiple touch point strategy with some of the customers. And so we want to make sure that they are exposed to other people that use the product, plus they see us on media platforms. And so by seeing the product multiple times, that is how you build trust. At our price point is not a purchase that just happened overnight. You need to digest it. You need to discuss it with your partner. You need to be convinced to invest this amount of money. And so trust is really important before you pull the plug, the trigger, and you buy the cover, the bait sleep cover.
Yeah, and so tapping. So I could see how like you got the sponsorship piece to it. You've got the founder themselves being visible and kind of like you said, like building in public. And then you've got kind of influential. I would imagine, like, especially because a lot of your word of mouth comes from people who I think would be considered aspirational to larger groups of people. I would imagine that that's part of it too, in terms of maybe they are aware of the financial incentive for sharing, but they don't do it anyway because that type of person wouldn't try to quote monetize their audience directly, right? Like they're just sharing it because they want to help, like you said, it transformed their lives and they want to help other people. So I bet there's almost a disincentive to try to transactionalize the referral in their case. Yeah.
And I think it also happens a lot casually, like literally, when we are having dinner with a friend. So it's not that you're there with the app. It's not like, again, a $10 app. It's more something you're having dinner. We talk about this product. They go and they check it out. They see that Mercedes F1 uses the product and CrossFit, and then they see us on paid media. If they're on Twitter, they see other people raving about us. And so within X days, they end up buying.
Yeah. That makes sense. I'd love to learn a little bit. You have some content pillars, I think I would say, in terms of what you share personally. And obviously there's like some, behind the scenes business stuff, there's wellness stuff, but increasingly, and maybe it's not increasing and I just noticed it more lately, but you've been sharing a lot about like kind of your evolution as a leader and as a manager. And, I know you've been really fortunate in terms of some of your board members and your ability to kind of learn from them, but not every founder is able to kind of grow with the business and to level up with the business, especially when it hits kind of a pretty rapid inflection point. And it seems like you've managed to do that. I'd be curious to learn maybe what you've learned from mentors or what you've done yourself to be able to kind of level up as the company has grown in complexity and as the kind of stakes have gotten higher.
Yeah. I invest quite a bit of time on my own growth. I would call it probably 10 hours a week. And I call it like learning. And it could be reading books, listening to podcasts, or even working on our own operational excellence. That is where we have raised the bar quite a bit. I wrote actually a whole memo that is our operating playbook about how I rate and judge our executives and myself. And there are 5 attributes of greatness at paid sleep based on how you need to operate. And then there is almost like 3 to 4 pages describing each of these attributes. And this is the reflection of things that Keith Rabois might have shared, or Slutman, the CEO of Snowflake, or also from books like High Output Management. So I read a lot, I listen a lot, I have mentors or board members, and then I try to condensate everything and transfer that to my people.
Are there any major takeaways that you kind of learned that you think are most relevant or applicable, maybe most broadly applicable to other founders or folks that might be listening to this, that if they don't have the benefit of ever having those kinds of folks on their board, but could benefit from that? Anything major that you took away from them?
Yeah, a couple of key things. The first one is a rule that we call opposite metrics. When you set a metric, you always need to set an opposite metric. And I give you an idea. If you go to the growth team and you just say, look, you need to grow 5x this year, they will throw money out of the window, or they will pay people to buy the product, and then they can grow 5x. So you need to set what we call net margin, right? Or a CAC. And so those are 2 opposite metrics. It's like even in hiring, right? If you just go to the hiring people and say, oh, you need to hire 100 people, they just hire anyone, and then they achieve their own goal. But then there needs to be a quality metric. So opposite metric is the most important. Never set a metric if there is not an opposite one. The second,
and are those always one is like a quantity type of metric, or some type of a growth type of metric, and then the other one is related to the quality of that growth and whatever that lens is? Does that tend to be the pairs? So it's like if I see an increase in customer complaints, then obviously we have a quality problem. Is that kind of how you think about those two?
Yeah, it might not be quantity, but it could be even a deadline, or you need to ship this product with this date, but then you need to have this quality, right? So it could be time or quantity and quality, but more or less it's three, and you play with two out of the three.
Got it.
So that is one. The second one is developing people. So you have heard many times people saying, no, your company is your team, the importance of hiring. But I think a part that is not explained well enough is how important it is for executives to develop their own people and to develop what we call internally barrels, right? So the rule of thumb is you can run as many projects as the number of barrels. Barrels are A players that can take a project where I just come to you, I tell you my idea, you go and you execute meeting our bar. Mm-hmm. If you don't have barrels as an executive, and you are the only barrel, hopefully, because you have the executive, you can run one real program. Yeah. So you need to keep developing your people from when they're junior and to develop them into barrels to a point where within 6 to 9 months, they can really run programs for you. And that becomes what we call managerial leverage. Yeah. And so substantially, what we do internally is we say, how many people you have, okay, and how many core initiatives you're running. So let's say you have 9 people, okay, and you're running 3 core initiatives. Your rate is 3.
Okay.
Let's say you have instead 30 people and you run 3 programs. Your rate is 10. So the higher the number, the relationship, the worse you are doing. Meaning sometimes executives, they say, oh, I have a larger team, so I'm cooler than you. But that's not the right proxy. The right proxy is how efficient you are. And so is number of people divided by the number of core initiatives. And the lower the number, the more efficient you are.
How have you learned about either synergies or dependencies among those core initiatives? Like, how do you avoid a situation where you've got a bunch of A players that are all running in? How do you tie that back to, hey, this is where the organization's trying to go, and how do I make sure that this initiative isn't conflicting with this initiative, or keeping them kind of from running into each other? Do you ever are there any strategies to kind of minimize that so everybody's able to kind of sprint without having a bunch of collisions kind of along the way?
Yeah. So we have a spreadsheet where every executive has its own goals for the quarter, right? Yep. These goals are substantially OKRs, and the KRs, they have, you need to move this metric and that metric, so opposite metrics. And so I review each OKRs with each executive first. And then we do a review all together to make sure that everything is aligned, and if there are cross-functional goals, both executives or the multiple executives are aligned.
Got it.
And so that is the easiest way to make sure that everything that is happening in the company is moving towards the same end goal. Yeah. There could be a new product introduction, or it could be improving NPS or doubling down on growth. You still have the problem sometimes at the micro level with some people. And so for that, what we do is we double down on writing and agendas. Our agendas are substantially memos. We have weekly meetings about, a certain topic. And the agenda is like 2 to 3 pages, which is very detailed. And in this way, you leverage clarity of thinking, which is one of the 5 attributes of excellence we use.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. It's kind of like the Amazon kind of memo model, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's exactly that applied to agendas on a weekly basis.
Got it. Very cool. You mentioned your 5 attributes of greatness. Actually, I have read that. And one of the ones that I was particularly interested in was you emphasized this idea of pace a lot. And I think you said you stopped thinking of yourself as a manager, which is kind of a reactive term, and you started thinking of yourself as a pacemaker instead. I'd love to learn, like, I guess, why that was an area of emphasis for you, and then maybe some of the ways that you've found effective for modeling that in your team, because that was a really interesting idea.
Yeah. So the first most important thing is startups, they have one advantage against the big company, which is speed, right? That is how you defeat bigger companies, because they have more money than you, they have more people, they have better customer knowledge. So the only way you can beat them is by moving faster. But your job as a CEO or as a manager is to compress the cycles of everything you do. If you start losing 2 days a week and you start losing, 20, 25% efficiency per week, you're substantially losing a week in a month, right? Yeah. So I go back to my team and I tell them every single time that a week is 2% of the year, right? Would you throw 2% of the money away every month? No, right? So 2% matters in a company. The way then you fix that is by setting deadlines for everything you do. Okay, so first step one is, what is the deadline for everything you tell me? Even if there is one action item, the action item needs to have a deadline. But then you also challenge them on the deadline, in particular on the sequencing, right? Okay. Because there might be 5 action items, and maybe the most important, just because it came up last, now they're telling you that it will take a week. And so your job as a manager is to revisit the sequencing of all the action items and making sure that what really matters the most can be done faster. And when we think faster is, usually you should try to think in 48 hours increments. Obviously, it depends on the project, right? If it's hardware, if it's software, it depends on the complexity of the action item. But let's say you now need to take a decision, you need to look at certain data, come back to me with data X, Y, and Z to take the decision. On my mind, that needs to happen at the latest within 48 hours. Better if it happens today.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. That's really, really cool. As you're thinking about, like, so, I mean, you take your professional development pretty seriously. And I'm sure that you have pretty aggressive goals kind of for the next, say, 12 to 18 months. Like, what are you thinking about and prioritizing from a self-development perspective to be the right leader for the kind of the next phase of the organization? Are there any kind of topics that you're focusing on or ways that you're trying to kind of level up personally?
Yeah, the big focus right now for me is to try to write down all the knowledge I have developed and learned. Yeah. And second, even bigger is I started doing an internal session with our second lines when I teach them the 5 attributes of excellence. And more than teaching them is more, okay, this is the memo, read it. I don't want to talk about that. You can read it on your own. Make a question or tell me a problem you had last week, and let's discuss how I would have approached it. And it's not even just me, because it's a group session. There are like 5 to 10 people in the company. But okay, you had this problem. The rest of the group, how would you have approached it? And they start talking, and I just kind of direct a little bit the conversation. But then they start helping each other, and they start memorizing the 5 attributes of excellence. And okay, but here you should have done that within 48 hours, and you should have changed the order of priorities. And they start saying it on their own. So I'm just a passive host.
Yeah. So it sounds like, I mean, like you mentioned the idea of kind of managerial leverage. It sounds like a couple are, if I can write down and codify things that maybe have been resident inside of my head and people have been seeing by me modeling them, but that doesn't scale as well as kind of codifying them. So that's one. And then 2, it sounds like putting them in kind of group scenarios where you're prioritizing those meetings, because now that's an opportunity for you to kind of encode in their DNA, your 5 attributes, but kind of in a more scalable way than like a one-on-one or that type of thing. It seems like you're looking for ways to apply leverage kind of throughout. Is that fair?
Yeah, this is actually a rule from Keith Rabois, And I think Keith was investing 4 to 5 hours to prepare the all ends when he was at Square, the CEO.
Yeah.
And you say, wow, 4 to 5 hours for the CEO of Square. But his point was, if I invest 4 to 5 hours on something that can impact 100, 200, 300 people, that is the best efficiency I can ever find. And so in my own small world, what I do is, if I can teach 10 people how to be more efficient and more effective, and I invest 30 minutes, 45 minutes of my time, that is way more powerful than me coaching their executive where I don't even know what the transition or the knowledge transfer will be.
100%. Yeah, that's really, really cool. That's awesome. Well, listen, I want to respect your time. This has been really, really fascinating. For folks that maybe want to learn more, I guess, about Eat Sleep, or maybe about your thoughts as you're starting, sounds like you're starting to share that stuff a little bit more. Where do I send people?
They can go to 8sleep.com, 8 like the number, EIGHT sleep.com. And there on the homepage, there is also a link to my Twitter. I'm pretty active there. So if you want to know more about sleep myself or some of these operational excellence principles, please just follow me.
Very cool. Well, again, I really appreciate it. And, your product, other than maybe my phone, I can't think of a product that's had a bigger kind of material impact on my life. So, congrats on all your success so far, and look forward to seeing what you continue to do kind of in the coming years. So this was really great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.